What if the one thing connecting you to a past you never knew was hanging around your neck? For 22-year-old Clara Dannies, a simple silver locket was her only link to the parents she couldn't remember. For Evelyn Sterling, a reclusive millionaire haunted by a 2-decade-old tragedy, that same locket was a ghost, a symbol of a loss so profound it had shattered her world. One rainy Tuesday, in a cheap diner smelling of stale coffee and regret, these two worlds collided. It wasn't a calculated meeting. It was a cruel twist of fate that began with a gasp, a pointed finger, and a single heartbreaking question that would unravel a web of lies, betrayal, and a secret kept buried for 22 years. The Sterling Grandview Hotel was a monolith of tinted glass and polished marble that scraped the New York skyline. From its penthouse suite, Evelyn Sterling could survey her kingdom, a sprawling empire of hotels, real estate, and investments built by her late husband, Richard. But at 75, the panoramic view of Central Park felt more like a window into a gilded cage. Richard was gone. Her daughter, her beautiful, vibrant Lily, was gone. All that remained were memories, polished and sterile like the furniture, and an emptiness so vast it echoed in the cavernous rooms. Her handlers, a team of assistants, chefs, and drivers, managed her life with quiet efficiency. They insulated her from the mundane, the gritty, the real. But sometimes the gilded cage became unbearable. On this particular Tuesday, a relentless October drizzle wept down the windows, mirroring the sorrow in her heart. It was the anniversary, 22 years since the phone call that had cleaved her life in two. "Arthur," she said, her voice thin but firm, addressing the man who had been her husband's valet and was now her unwavering confidant. "Cancel my luncheon with the board. I need some air." Arthur, a man whose posture was as impeccable as his loyalty, simply nodded. "Of course, madam. Shall I have the Bentley brought around?" "No," Evelyn said, a rebellious spark in her tired eyes. "No Bentley, no driver, just a taxi, and don't you dare follow me." An hour later, Evelyn Sterling, wrapped in a simple but exquisitely tailored cashmere coat, found herself in a part of the city she hadn't visited in decades. She walked aimlessly until the rain intensified, forcing her into the first shelter she saw. The Daily Grind, a diner whose neon sign flickered defiantly against the gray afternoon. The diner was a symphony of organized chaos, the clatter of cutlery, the sizzle of the grill, the low hum of conversation. It smelled of fried onions, hot coffee, and damp wool. It was aggressively, wonderfully real. Evelyn slid into a worn vinyl booth, the cracked red material cold against her silk blouse. She felt like an alien, an artifact from another world. A young woman approached her table, a notepad in hand. "Hi there, what can I get for you?" she asked, her voice weary but kind. She couldn't have been more than 22. Her uniform was clean but frayed at the cuffs, and her shoes, sensible black sneakers, were scuffed at the toes. Her face was framed by tired chestnut hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, but her eyes, large and startlingly green, held a flicker of warmth. "Just coffee, please." "Black," Evelyn murmured, her gaze distant. "You got it," the waitress said, scribbling it down. As she leaned forward to clear a stray sugar packet, something caught the light, a glint of silver against her collarbone. It was a locket, heart-shaped and clearly old, its surface tarnished with age. It hung from a delicate, thin chain. Evelyn's breath hitched. Her world, which had been moving in slow motion, suddenly snapped into sharp, painful focus. It couldn't be. Her hand, adorned with a diamond ring worth more than the entire diner, began to tremble. Her eyes locked onto the piece of jewelry. She knew its every detail, the tiny, almost invisible engraving of a lily vine along its edge, the specific way the clasp was fashioned, the familiar heart shape. It was a custom piece, commissioned by Richard for their daughter Lily's 16th birthday. There wasn't another one like it in the world. "Where?" Evelyn's voice was a choked whisper. "Where did you get that?" The waitress, whose name tag read Clara, looked up, startled by the intensity in the old woman's voice. She instinctively clutched the locket. "Oh, this? It was my mother's. It's all I have of her." The words struck Evelyn like a physical blow. Her meticulously constructed composure, the fortress she had built around her heart for 22 years, crumbled into dust. The sounds of the diner faded into a dull roar. The face of this young waitress, this stranger, blurred through a sudden, hot rush of tears. A sob escaped her lips, raw and ragged. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated anguish that turned heads across the diner. The old woman who had walked in with the silent authority of immense wealth was now just a grandmother, weeping uncontrollably. Clara stared, her pen dropping from her hand and clattering onto the tiled floor. She was frozen, a mix of fear and utter confusion. "Ma'am, are you okay?" But Evelyn couldn't answer. She could only stare at the locket, the impossible ghost from her past, and see the face of her lost daughter, Lily. The waitress wasn't just wearing a familiar piece of jewelry. She was wearing Evelyn's heart, and Evelyn Sterling had just come face to face with a miracle she'd long since given up on. In the middle of a greasy spoon diner on a rainy Tuesday, her entire world had just been turned upside down. Clara Danny's had seen her share of strange customers at the daily grind. She'd served men who talked to their food, women who paid in handfuls of foreign coins, and tourists who asked for directions to landmarks that didn't exist. But she had never, ever had a customer break down in a storm of weeping just by looking at her. The old woman's sobs were wrenching, deep tremors that shook her frail-looking frame. The entire diner had fallen silent. Gus, the owner and grill cook, peered over the counter, his spatula frozen mid-flip. "Ma'am, please," Clara said, her voice gentle as she knelt by the booth. "Can I get you some water? Should I call someone?" The woman, Evelyn, finally looked up. Her eyes, a startlingly clear blue, were red-rimmed and swimming with a chaotic mix of emotions Clara couldn't begin to decipher. Grief, shock, and something else. A desperate, unbelievable hope. "The locket," Evelyn whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please, child, let me see it." Clara hesitated. The locket was her anchor. It was the only tangible proof that she'd come from somewhere, that she hadn't just materialized in the sterile offices of the foster care system at the age of 3, with no memories and no last name. She wore it always. But the raw pain in this woman's face was undeniable. Hesitantly, she unclasped the thin silver chain and placed the locket in Evelyn's trembling, outstretched hand. Evelyn's fingers closed around it as if it were a living thing. Her thumb traced the engraved lily vine, a gesture of profound familiarity. She didn't even need to open it. She knew what was supposed to be inside. Not a picture, but a tiny folded piece of parchment, upon which Lily had written a line from their favorite poem. "Where the river meets the sea, I'll be waiting for thee." It was their secret promise. After a long moment, she composed herself, drawing on a lifetime of social discipline. She wiped her eyes with a silk handkerchief pulled from her handbag, her movements now slow and deliberate. "Forgive me," she said, her voice regaining some of its authority. It reminded me of something I lost a long time ago. Something very precious." She handed the locket back to Clara. Her gaze lingered on Clara's face, studying her features, the curve of her jaw, the sprinkle of freckles on her nose, the vibrant green of her eyes. Lily's eyes. "My name is Evelyn Sterling," she said, her voice steadier now. "I would like to compensate you for your time, and for my outburst." She opened her crocodile leather handbag, a purse that likely cost more than Clara's annual rent, and pulled out a stack of $100 bills held together by a gold clip. She peeled off 10 of them. "Please, take this." Clara stared at the $1,000. It was more than 2 weeks' pay. It was enough to fix the rattling noise in her used car and pay her overdue utility bill. But something felt wrong. It felt like a transaction, a way to dismiss the raw, unsettling moment that had just passed between them. "I can't take that," Clara said, pushing the money back gently. "You were just upset. A glass of water's on the house." Evelyn looked surprised, then a flicker of respect entered her eyes. "You are a kind girl. What is your full name?" "Clara Danny's, ma'am." "Danny's?" Evelyn repeated the name, tasting it. It meant nothing to her. "Tell me, Clara Danny's, what do you know about your mother? About where she got this locket?" Clara's heart sank a little. This was the raw nerve of her existence. "Not much," she admitted, her voice quiet. I grew up in the system. They told me my parents died in a car accident when I was a baby. The locket was with my things at the hospital. That's all I know. It's the only thing I have. A car accident. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. It was too much. It was too perfect. Too cruel a coincidence. I see, Evelyn said, her mind racing. She couldn't push further. Not here, not now. She would scare the girl away. She stood up, her movements graceful, despite the turmoil inside her. Thank you for the coffee, Clara. She placed $100 bill on the table. For the coffee and your kindness, she insisted, then turned and walked out of the diner, leaving a stunned Clara and 1,000 unanswered questions in her wake. Back in the sterile silence of her penthouse, Evelyn paced like a caged lioness. Arthur met her at the door, his face a mask of concern. Madam, are you all right? No, Arthur. I am not all right, she said, her voice trembling with a terrifying, reawakened energy. I think I may be going mad, or I think I may have just seen a ghost. She explained what had happened, her words tumbling out in a rush. The diner, the girl, and the locket. Arthur listened patiently, his expression unchanging. Madam, with all due respect, he said when she had finished, it is the anniversary. Your mind, your heart, they are playing tricks on you. A similar locket, perhaps. A coincidental resemblance. You must be careful not to build castles on a foundation of grief. It was not similar, Arthur. It was hers. I felt it. I saw it. And the girl. Her eyes. They are Lily's eyes. She wrung her hands. She said her parents died in a car accident. The same story. The same timing. Hundreds of people die in accidents every year, madam. It is a tragic but common story, Arthur reasoned, his voice a soothing balm of logic. The authorities were very clear. Lily and the baby. They were both gone. We held a funeral. We buried an empty casket for your granddaughter because there was nothing left to bury. The brutal reminder silenced her for a moment. The fire, the mangled wreckage, the closed casket funeral for Lily. The unbearable sorrow of a second, empty memorial for a baby she'd never even had the chance to name, whom Lily had planned to call Isabella, but the seed of doubt had been planted. What if the authorities were wrong? What if, in the chaos of that horrific night, a mistake had been made, a terrible, life-altering mistake? No, Evelyn said, her voice hardening with a resolve she hadn't felt in years. For 22 years, I have accepted their story as fact. Today, for the first time, I am questioning it. Find out everything you can about a waitress named Clara Dannies at a diner called The Daily Grind, and get me in touch with David Peterson. I need the best private investigator in this city. I don't care what it costs. Arthur saw the look in her eyes. It was the same fierce determination that had helped her husband build an empire. It was not the look of a grieving woman chasing phantoms. It was the look of a matriarch on the hunt. Very good, madam, he said with a slight bow. The lie, whatever it was, had stood for 22 years. Evelyn Sterling was about to take a sledgehammer to its foundations. Clara couldn't shake the encounter. She replayed it in her mind as she wiped down tables and refilled salt shakers. The wealthy woman's visceral grief was unsettling, but it was her questions about the locket that echoed the loudest. That evening, in the small, cramped apartment she shared with her roommate, Maya, she finally took the locket off and examined it under the warm glow of a table lamp. You're quiet tonight, Maya observed, looking up from her nursing textbooks. Tough day with the coffee zombies? Something weird happened, Clara said, turning the cool metal over in her fingers. This ridiculously rich woman came in, like old money rich. She took one look at my locket and had a complete meltdown, crying, shaking. The whole diner stopped and stared. Maya's eyebrows shot up. Seriously? Over your locket? Yeah, she asked where I got it. I told her it was my mom's and she just broke. Then she offered me $1,000. Clara! And you didn't take it? Maya exclaimed, aghast. No, it felt weird, like she was trying to buy my story, or my silence or something. She asked my name and what happened to my parents. When I told her about the car accident, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Clara pried the delicate clasp of the locket open. It was a struggle. She rarely opened it, afraid of breaking the fragile hinge. Inside, there was no space for a picture. Instead, nestled against the silver backing was a tiny yellowed piece of folded paper, as thin as a butterfly's wing. "Did you ever read what's inside?" Maya asked, peering over her shoulder. "Once, a long time ago. My caseworker helped me unfold it." "I was scared to do it myself," Clara confessed. She carefully used her fingernail to unfold the delicate note. The ink was faded, written in an elegant, looping script. It says, "Where the river meets the sea, I'll be waiting for thee." "Wow," Maya breathed. "That's so romantic and sad. It's like a line from an old poem." "I guess," Clara said, carefully refolding it. "It doesn't mean much to me. It's just a piece of her. The only piece." She snapped the locket shut, a familiar melancholy settling over her. For her, the locket was a dead end. For the woman in the diner, it had clearly been a beginning. Meanwhile, across town, Evelyn Sterling's investigation was already in motion. David Peterson, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion and ruthless efficiency, sat opposite her in the penthouse study. He was a former detective with tired eyes that missed nothing. "Clara Danny's 22, Peterson reported, reading from his tablet. "No birth certificate on file under that name. She first appears in the system at age 3, brought to the St. Jude's Foundling Home in Queens. The intake notes are sparse. Jane Doe, approximate age 3, found abandoned. The name Clara was given to her at the home. Danny's was assigned later. She was bounced between 3 foster homes, emancipated at 18. No criminal record. Works 2 jobs, the diner and a night shift stocking shelves at a grocery store. Enrolled part-time at a community college, studying social work. By all accounts, she's a good kid who's had a rough go of it." "Nothing about a car accident? Nothing about her parents?" Evelyn pressed. "That's the story she tells, and likely the one she was told by a caseworker trying to give her some semblance of a narrative. But officially, there's no link. The paper trail starts when she's 3. Before that, she's a ghost." The word ghost sent a chill down Evelyn's spine. Then we dig deeper. "The accident that took my daughter happened on the Palisades Parkway 22 years ago last Tuesday, October 28th. A multi-car pileup in the rain. Check every hospital in a 50-mile radius. I want every intake record from that night, every unidentified child." "Evelyn, those records could be sealed, archived, even destroyed," Peterson warned. "It's a long shot." "I have underwritten the construction of 2 hospital wings in this city, David," Evelyn stated, her tone icy. "Find a way to unseal them. I want to know if a baby girl survived that crash." Her renewed sense of purpose did not go unnoticed. News in the upper echelons of New York society traveled through whispers at charity galas and over hushed phone calls. The story of the reclusive Evelyn Sterling's bizarre interest in a common waitress was too juicy to ignore. And it eventually reached the ears of the one person Evelyn had not considered, her brother-in-law, Marcus Thorne. Marcus was Richard's younger brother, a man who wore charm like a well-tailored suit that couldn't quite hide his grasping ambition. He managed a division of Sterling Enterprises, always in the shadow of his deceased brother's legacy and, by extension, Evelyn's control. He arranged a casual visit to the penthouse under the guise of discussing a quarterly report. He found Evelyn in her conservatory, surrounded by orchids. "Evelyn, you look revitalized," he said, kissing her on the cheek. His smile was smooth, but his eyes were sharp and probing. "I'm feeling well, Marcus." "Thank you," she replied coolly. "I heard the most peculiar story," he began, circling a rare black orchid. "That you've taken an interest in a young woman, a waitress. Some say you're planning to make her a beneficiary in some new charitable project." Evelyn's spine stiffened. "My charitable donations are my own affair." Of course," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a sympathetic purr. It's the anniversary, a difficult time. People are saying you're latching onto a stranger, projecting your grief, that you're becoming vulnerable. I'm only worried for you, my dear. We wouldn't want anyone taking advantage of your good nature." It was a veiled threat, a subtle warning packaged as concern. He was telling her to stop. He was dismissing her search as the ramblings of a lonely old woman. The condescension in his tone lit a fire in her. Thank you for your concern, Marcus, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. But my mind is as sharp as it has ever been, and I assure you, I am not the one who should be worried. His smile tightened. The message was received. It was a declaration of war. Unbeknownst to both, Marcus's concern was far from benevolent. After leaving the penthouse, he made a panicked phone call from the back of his limousine. "We have a problem," he hissed into the phone. "She's digging. The old woman is digging into the past because of some girl. Find out who she is, watch her, and make sure she doesn't talk to Evelyn Sterling again." A few days later, Clara was finishing her shift when a young man in an expensive suit approached her. He was handsome, with the same sharp features and polished charm as Marcus Thorne. It was his son, Julian. "Clara Danny's?" he asked, his smile disarming. "Yeah, that's me. My name is Julian Thorne. I represent a philanthropic fund that helps young people who are working their way through college. An anonymous benefactor heard about your situation and would like to offer you a scholarship. A full ride, plus living expenses. No strings attached." Clara was floored. A scholarship? Just like that?" "Just like that," Julian confirmed, sliding a business card in a thick envelope across the counter. "That's a cashier's check for $10,000 to get you started. All you have to do is sign an agreement to focus on your studies. And as part of the terms of this anonymous gift, you would need to cease contact with certain individuals who might be a distraction. People like my aunt, Evelyn Sterling." The name hit Clara like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a scholarship. This was a bribe. This was hush money. The old woman wasn't just grieving. She was looking for something. And someone very powerful, was terrified of what she might find. Clara looked from the check to Julian's slick smile and realized she was no longer just a waitress. She was a pawn in a very dangerous game. Clara pushed the envelope back across the counter. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and indignation. "I don't understand," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Why would your aunt be a distraction? She was just a customer." Julian's smile didn't falter, but a flicker of annoyance crossed his eyes. He hadn't expected resistance. "My aunt is eccentric," he said smoothly. "She's elderly and has been through a great deal of tragedy. She sometimes forms attachments. It's for her own good and, frankly, for yours. This is a life-changing opportunity, Miss Danny's. A path out of this." He gestured vaguely at the diner. The condescension was palpable. He saw her as a problem that could be solved with money. "This," Clara said, her voice sharp, "is my life, and it's not for sale." She slid the check back to him. "Please tell your anonymous benefactor, thank you, but no thank you." Julian was momentarily stunned into silence. He picked up the envelope, his expression hardening. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone no longer friendly. "A very big mistake." He turned and walked out, leaving Clara shaken but resolute. The attempted bribe was a clumsy, desperate move, and it confirmed everything for Clara. Evelyn Sterling wasn't crazy, and her locket wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a key. She went home and told Maya everything. "A $10,000 bribe? Holy crap, Clara!" Maya's eyes were wide. "This is getting serious. These people are scared of you." "But why?" Clara paced their small living room. "What do they think I know? I don't know anything." "You know about the locket," Maya pointed out. "And you exist. Maybe that's enough. You need to talk to her. To Evelyn." Clara knew she was right. She found the main number for Sterling Enterprises online, and with trembling hands she called. She was passed through 3 secretaries, each one more skeptical than the last, until she finally said the magic words. "Please tell Mrs. Sterling that Clara Danny's is calling about the locket, the one with the inscription." The call was put through almost immediately. "Miss Danny's," Evelyn's voice came over the line, laced with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "I am so glad you called." "We need to talk," Clara said simply. They agreed to meet the next day, not at the penthouse or the diner, but on neutral ground, a quiet corner of the New York Public Library. Meanwhile, David Peterson's investigation was hitting a wall of bureaucratic concrete. Hospital records from 22 years ago were a mess of misfiled papers and corrupted digital archives. But Evelyn's influence was a powerful solvent. Doors that were sealed began to creak open. A clerk, motivated by a generous donation to his retirement fund, found a box of archived emergency room logs from the night of the crash. Peterson spent hours poring over the faded dot matrix printouts. He saw Lily Sterling's name, admitted as Jane Doe number 4, later identified. DOA, dead on arrival. His heart sank for his client, but he kept digging. The logs were chaotic, a testament to a horrific multi-car pileup. Dozens of injured, 5 fatalities. And then he saw it, an entry that made the hairs on his arms stand up. A few lines below Lily's entry was another. Jane Doe number 7, infant female, approx. 6 to 12 months, admitted with minor contusions, smoke inhalation, discharged. Discharged? An unidentified baby, a survivor from a fatal crash, was simply discharged? It made no sense. There should have been a police report, social services involvement, a media frenzy to find the parents. Peterson checked the discharge signature line. It was signed by a head nurse named Brenda O'Malley, and next to it, a handwritten note. Discharged to custody of family. What family? The baby was a Jane Doe. Peterson felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the crack in the dam. He immediately started a search for Brenda O'Malley. He discovered she had retired 15 years ago, moved to Florida, and fallen off the map. Finding her would be difficult, but it was no longer a wild goose chase. It was a hunt for the first witness to a 22-year-old crime. At the same time, Julian Thorne reported his failure to his father. Marcus was furious. She refused the money? A broke waitress refused $10,000? He roared, slamming his fist on his mahogany desk. The girl is more troublesome than I thought. She's not just going to go away, Dad, Julian said, a note of unease in his voice. Maybe we should do nothing, Marcus snapped. Doing anything more only confirms we have something to hide. Our only move now is to discredit Evelyn. We continue the narrative. She's a grieving, confused old woman, losing her grip, seeing her dead daughter in every young face she meets. I'll speak to the board. I'll speak to her doctors. We'll build a case for concern over her well-being. It was a chillingly corporate term for what he meant, proving she was mentally incompetent to run the company or to pursue a decades-old cold case. Julian felt a knot of guilt tighten in his stomach. He had grown up adoring his Aunt Evelyn. He remembered her kindness after his own mother passed away. Now his father was planning to destroy her, to paint her as senile, all to protect a secret he didn't fully understand. For the first time in his life, Julian began to question his father's pragmatic approach to business and family. He was a loyal son, but the foundation of that loyalty was beginning to crack. The next day, in the hushed, cavernous reading room of the library, Clara saw Evelyn Sterling waiting at a small table. She looked smaller, more vulnerable, without her penthouse armor. Clara sat down, placing her worn backpack on the floor. She took a deep breath. You wanted to see the locket. Evelyn simply nodded, her eyes fixed on Clara's face. With steady hands, Clara unclasped the chain and handed it to the old woman. Evelyn accepted it with reverence. This time, her fingers went straight to the clasp. It sprang open. She didn't look at the tiny folded paper. She didn't need to. She knew what it should say. My daughter Lily, we had a special place, Evelyn began, her voice soft and thick with memory. A small cove on the coast of Maine, where our family has a summer home. The river from our property flows out and meets the Atlantic right there. It was her sanctuary. When she was a teenager and wanted to feel close to me, or to her father after he passed, she'd write me notes and leave them there. She always signed off with the same line from a poem we both loved. Her gaze finally met Clara's, her blue eyes pleading, desperate for confirmation. Tell me, child, please, what does the inscription say? Clara looked at the old woman's anguished face, and the words that had been a meaningless, romantic phrase her whole life suddenly took on an immense weight. It says, Clara whispered, her voice trembling as the truth began to dawn on her, where the river meets the sea, I'll be waiting for thee. A single perfect tear rolled down Evelyn Sterling's cheek. It wasn't a tear of grief this time. It was a tear of certainty. Arthur had been wrong. The police had been wrong. Everyone had been wrong. This girl, this waitress with her mother's eyes and her mother's secret promise around her neck, was not a coincidence. She was Isabella. She was her granddaughter. She was home. The revelation in the library changed everything. For Evelyn, the flickering ember of hope had erupted into a roaring flame. For Clara, the solid ground of her identity had turned to quicksand. Could this be real? Could this elegant, powerful, grieving woman truly be her grandmother? The idea was so overwhelming, so far beyond the scope of a life spent making ends meet, that she could barely process it. Isabella, Evelyn whispered, testing the name on her tongue. That's what your mother wanted to name you. Isabella Rose Sterling. Clara, Isabella, shook her head, a gesture of pure disbelief. I don't know what to say. This is insane. I know it is, Evelyn said, her voice gentle. But it's the truth, and I will prove it to you, to the world. She insisted Clara come back to the penthouse with her. Arthur met them at the door, his professional mask slipping for just a moment as he took in the sight of Evelyn, with her arm linked through the young waitress's. He saw the locket in his employer's hand and the look in her eyes, and he knew that the world had irrevocably shifted. Evelyn led Clara to a room that had been kept locked for 22 years. Lily's bedroom. It was preserved perfectly, a time capsule of a young woman's life. Posters of 90s rock bands on the wall, a collection of classic novels on the shelf, a dried rose in a silver bud vase on her vanity. And pictures. Dozens of them. Clara stared at a large, framed photograph on the dresser. It was a woman with a radiant smile, her hair a cascade of chestnut waves, her eyes a familiar, vibrant green. Clara felt a jolt, like looking at a reflection in a distorted mirror. It was her face, but softer, happier. It was her mother. That's Lily, Evelyn said softly, standing behind her. Your mother. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. For the first time, she wasn't just an orphan with a locket. She was a daughter. She had a history. The sheer weight and beauty of it was crushing. While this emotional reunion was unfolding, David Peterson was on a flight to Naples, Florida. He'd gotten a hit. Brenda O'Malley, the retired nurse, was living in a quiet retirement community, a life funded by a sudden and unexplained inheritance she received shortly after she quit her job at the hospital. He found her tending to a garden of hibiscus flowers, a stout woman in her late 60s with faded red hair and eyes that held a deep, lingering sadness. When Peterson introduced himself and mentioned the Palisades Parkway crash from 22 years ago, all the color drained from her face. I don't know anything about that, she said quickly, turning away. Brenda, I'm not a cop, Peterson said, his voice calm and non-threatening. I work for Evelyn Sterling, Lily Sterling's mother. All she wants is the truth. Brenda flinched at the name. She began pulling weeds with frantic energy. The truth is in the records. A baby was discharged. That's all I know. Discharged to whom? Peterson pressed gently. There was no family there. The baby was a Jane Doe. Yet your signature released her to family. A healthy baby girl who survived a crash that killed her mother just vanished from the system. Help me understand how that happens, Brenda. The woman finally crumbled. She dropped her trowel and sank onto a garden bench, her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent, long overdue sobs. He said he was a friend of the family, she began, her voice muffled. A man in an expensive suit. He came to the hospital in the middle of the night, during all the chaos. He knew things. He knew the mother had died. He said the grandmother, the rich one, was hysterical with grief, that she couldn't handle seeing the baby. Not yet. He said he was there to take the child somewhere safe, away from the press. What was his name? He didn't give one, but he was persuasive, charming, and he offered me money. Her voice dropped to a shameful whisper. $50,000, in cash. He said it was a donation for my troubles, to ensure my discretion. My husband had just been laid off. We were about to lose our house. $50,000 was everything. Peterson's blood ran cold. He knew who it was. The description, the method, it screamed Marcus Thorne. He told me to sign the discharge papers and forget I ever saw the baby. Brenda continued, tears streaming down her face. He said the family would handle the official paperwork later. He just wanted to protect them from a media circus. It almost sounded noble, but I knew it was wrong. I knew it the moment he walked out of that hospital with that beautiful little girl. What did he look like? Peterson asked, pulling out his tablet. Tall, dark hair, very well dressed. He had a mole right here, she said, touching a spot just beside her left eye. Peterson pulled up a photo of Marcus Thorne from the Sterling Enterprises website. He zoomed in. The small, faint mole was there, usually hidden by his glasses or lost in professional headshots. He showed the picture to Brenda. Her eyes widened in recognition. A choked gasp escaped her lips. That's him. Oh, God. That's the man who took the baby. The guilt she had carried for 2 decades poured out of her. She confessed everything. How the man had given her the cash in a briefcase, how he had an associate waiting in a black car, how he'd instructed her that if anyone asked, the baby had been picked up by a distant relative. The lie was simple, elegant, and in the chaos of the night it held. I've lived with it every day, she wept. Every single day I've wondered what happened to that child. I used the money to save my house, to put my kids through college. But it was poison. It poisoned my whole life. Peterson recorded her entire statement. It was the smoking gun. He had the motive, Marcus's ambition and jealousy. He had the means, a bribe and a lie. And now he had the star witness. The dam of secrets hadn't just cracked, it had burst wide open. He called Evelyn immediately. We've got him, Peterson said, his voice grim. We've got it all. Evelyn listened on speakerphone, her arm wrapped tightly around Clara, around Isabella. The story of the betrayal, of the cold, calculated theft of her family washed over them. It was a crime born of greed, a wound left to fester for 22 years. Marcus, Evelyn breathed, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. The name was a curse. She looked at Isabella, at the life that had been stolen from them both, and her sorrow hardened into a cold, diamond-hard fury. Arthur, she commanded, her voice ringing with absolute authority. Call a full emergency meeting of the board of directors for tomorrow morning, and make sure Marcus and his son are both there. It's time for a family reunion. The Sterling Enterprises boardroom was on the 80th floor, a sterile expanse of glass and chrome designed to intimidate. On one side of the long, polished mahogany table sat the board members, a collection of stony-faced men and women in tailored suits, murmuring in confusion about the unprecedented emergency meeting. At the head of the table sat Evelyn Sterling, a portrait of regal fury. Beside her, in a simple dress borrowed from Lily's closet, sat Clara, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm against her ribs. Arthur stood sentinel behind them. Marcus and Julian Thorne were the last to arrive. Marcus strode in confidently, a look of curated concern on his face. He had orchestrated his narrative perfectly, spending the last 2 days planting seeds of doubt about Evelyn's mental state with key board members. He was ready to paint her as a delusional old woman. Evelyn, what is the meaning of this? He began, his tone patronizing. Calling an emergency meeting without a proper agenda? It's highly irregular. And who is this? He added, gesturing dismissively towards Clara. This, Evelyn said, her voice cutting through the room like shattered glass, is Isabella Rose Sterling, my granddaughter. A wave of shocked gasps and murmurs rippled through the boardroom. Marcus let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a performance of pity. Oh, Evelyn, he said, shaking his head sadly. It's worse than I thought. My dear, your grief has finally overwhelmed you. You found some poor, impressionable girl and filled her head with fantasies. This is a tragedy. He looked around at the board members, seeking their complicity. As I've mentioned to some of you, I believe it is time we discuss Evelyn's fitness to lead. For her own sake, of course. Julian stood beside his father, his face pale. He looked at Clara, then at Evelyn's unwavering gaze, and the knot of guilt in his stomach twisted into a viper. Before you proceed with declaring me incompetent, Marcus, Evelyn said, her voice dangerously calm, I have a presentation to make. A story, if you will. It begins 22 years ago, on a rainy night on the Palisades Parkway. The doors to the boardroom opened and David Peterson walked in, followed by an elderly woman with frightened eyes, Brenda O'Malley. Marcus froze. His carefully constructed composure shattered. A flicker of pure animal panic flashed in his eyes as he looked at the retired nurse. He knew her, and he knew why she was there. "This is Brenda O'Malley," Peterson announced, his voice booming in the silent room. "Formerly the head nurse at Mercy General Hospital. She was on duty the night of the accident." Evelyn nodded to Brenda. "Please, Mrs. O'Malley, tell them what you told us." With a trembling voice, Brenda recounted the entire story. The chaos of the ER, the unidentified baby girl who survived, the charming man in the expensive suit who claimed to be a friend of the family, the $50,000 bribe, and the illegal discharge. "And who was this man?" Evelyn asked, her eyes boring into her brother-in-law. "Would you recognize him if you saw him again?" "Yes," Brenda whispered, her gaze landing on Marcus. She raised a shaking finger. "It was him. I'd never forget his face. It was Mr. Thorne." The boardroom erupted. The accusation was monstrous, unthinkable. Marcus's face had turned a ghastly shade of gray. "This is absurd, a preposterous lie," he sputtered, his voice rising in desperation. "This woman is a paid imposter. Evelyn is orchestrating this entire farce to remove me from the board." "Is she, Dad?" The voice was quiet but firm. Everyone turned to look at Julian. He was no longer standing by his father's side. He had taken a step away, creating a physical and symbolic distance between them. "Julian, what are you doing?" Marcus hissed. "Stand by me." "I can't," Julian said, his voice cracking with emotion. "When you sent me to bribe her," he looked at Clara with profound apology, "you said it was to protect Aunt Evelyn from her own delusions. But it wasn't, was it? It was to protect yourself. All these years, the whispers, the secrets. You told me Lily's baby died in the fire after the crash. A complete loss. That was the lie, wasn't it? Your son is more perceptive than you give him credit for, Marcus," Evelyn said coldly. She pressed a button and a large screen descended from the ceiling. A bank statement appeared. "This is a record of a $50,000 cash withdrawal from one of your offshore accounts, Marcus. Dated October 29th, the day after the accident," Peterson explained. "And this," he continued as the image changed to a legal document, "is a copy of your late brother Richard's will. In the event of both Lily and her direct heirs passing, a significant portion of the voting shares in this company would revert to you. You didn't just want power, Marcus. You wanted it all. You stole a child, my grandchild, for a seat at the head of this table. The evidence was absolute, the testimony unshakable. The board members stared at Marcus not as a colleague, but as a monster. His throne of lies had crumbled into dust around him. Defeated, Marcus sank into a chair. The fight was gone, replaced by the hollow emptiness of exposure. "I was always in his shadow," he whispered, a pathetic confession. "Richard had everything. The business, Evelyn, the perfect daughter. I just wanted my share. It wasn't supposed to be like this. The girl was supposed to disappear, to have a better life somewhere else. I was rebalancing the scales." "You destroyed a family to rebalance the scales." Evelyn's voice thundered with the force of 2 decades of suppressed rage and grief. "You let me mourn a living child. You watched me suffer every single day, and you said nothing." She stood up, walking over to him, her presence immense. "You are no longer a part of this family or this company. Security will escort you out. You will face justice for what you have done." She looked past him to his son. "Julian." Julian looked up, his face etched with shame. "Aunt Evelyn, I am so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know the extent of it." "I believe you," Evelyn said, a hint of softness entering her voice. "You have your father's ambition. Let us see if you have your mother's integrity. The choice is yours." Security guards entered the room. They flanked Marcus, who didn't even look up as they led him away like a common criminal. The reign of Marcus Thorne was over. In the stunned silence of the boardroom, Evelyn turned to Clara, to Isabella, and took her hand. She faced the board. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice clear and strong, "allow me to reintroduce you to Isabella Rose Sterling, my granddaughter, and the rightful heir to the Sterling legacy. Clara stood beside her grandmother, no longer a waitress, no longer an orphan. She was a survivor, a Sterling, and her real life was just beginning. The months that followed the explosive board meeting were a whirlwind of upheaval and healing. The story of the Sterling heiress was a media sensation, a modern-day fairy tale spun with threads of corporate greed and family betrayal. Marcus Thorne was charged with kidnapping and fraud, his trial becoming a public spectacle. Julian, in a move that shocked everyone, testified against his own father, his voice heavy with regret as he detailed the web of deceit he had been a part of. He then quietly resigned from Sterling Enterprises and left the country, seeking to build a life outside the shadow of his family's crimes. For Clara, who was slowly learning to embrace the name Isabella, the transition was jarring. The tiny apartment she shared with Maya was replaced by a sun-drenched suite in the Sterling penthouse. Her worn-out sneakers were replaced by shoes that cost more than her old car. But the true adjustment wasn't material, it was emotional. She spent hours with Evelyn, piecing together the life she'd never known. Evelyn would share stories of Lily, her rebellious streak, her infectious laugh, her passion for painting. They'd look through old photo albums, and for the first time, Isabella could see her own features reflected in the faces of her ancestors. She had her father's chin, her mother's eyes, her grandfather Richard's determined brow. She wasn't an anomaly anymore. She was a continuation. There were difficult days. The trauma of her upbringing, the phantom limb of a life spent in scarcity and uncertainty, would sometimes ache. She felt a strange guilt for the life that had been stolen from her, and an even stranger one for the immense privilege she now possessed. "It's okay to be angry," Evelyn told her one afternoon as they sat on the terrace overlooking the park. "It's okay to be sad for the girl you were. She was strong. She survived. She brought you here, to me." Isabella took her grandmother's hand, the skin soft and thin like parchment. I wish I could have known her." "My mom." Evelyn smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "You do. You have her kindness, her resilience, and I have something else for you." She led Isabella to the grand study and unlocked a safe hidden behind a bookshelf. From it, she retrieved a velvet box. Inside was a collection of journals, bound in worn leather. "Your mother's," Evelyn said, her voice thick with emotion. "She wrote in them every day. She started a new one the day she found out she was pregnant with you." That night, Isabella sat in her room and opened the first journal. Lily's elegant script filled the pages, not with grand pronouncements, but with the intimate details of a young woman eagerly awaiting her child. She wrote about her cravings for pickles and ice cream, her debates with Richard over nursery colors, and her boundless love for the tiny life growing inside her. The last entry was dated October 27th, the day before the accident. "My dearest Isabella," it read, "tomorrow we drive up to the house in Maine. I can't wait to show you the Cove, our special place. I feel you kicking right now, a little flutter that feels like hope. I know we haven't met yet, but I love you more than words can say. Your father would have adored you. No matter what happens in this life, no matter where you go, know that I will always be with you, I promise. Where the river meets the sea, I'll be waiting for thee. All my love, Mom." Tears streamed down Isabella's face, soaking the page. They weren't tears of sadness, but of connection. The words on the locket weren't just a line from a poem. They were a direct promise from a mother to her daughter, a promise that had transcended time, tragedy, and betrayal. The following summer, Evelyn and Isabella made the trip to the family home in Maine. It was a beautiful, sprawling estate of gray stone and ivy, perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. They walked down a winding path through a forest of pine trees until they emerged onto a small, secluded beach. A gentle river snaked its way across the sand, spilling into the vast, churning sea. It was the Cove. They stood there for a long time, the salty wind whipping their hair, the sound of the waves a soothing rhythm. Isabella clutched the silver locket in her hand, the metal warmed by the sun. She was no longer Clara the waitress, defined by what she lacked. She was Isabella Sterling, defined by the love that had been waiting for her all along. She looked at her grandmother, whose face, etched with the lines of past sorrows, was now softened with peace. Evelyn Sterling was no longer a prisoner in her gilded cage. The ghost that had haunted her for 22 years was finally at rest. Here, in this place of promises, surrounded by the memory of her mother, Isabella finally felt like she was home. The river had finally met the sea, an incredible story of loss and an even more incredible story of reunion. It reminds us that family isn't just about the people we see every day, but about the unbreakable threads of love that connect us across time and even tragedy. Clara, who became Isabella, shows us that our circumstances don't have to define our destiny. And Evelyn's story is a powerful testament to a grandmother's undying hope and fierce love. They were robbed of 22 years, but they have a lifetime ahead to make new memories. What would you have done in Clara's shoes? Would you have taken the money? What about in Evelyn's? How far would you go to uncover the truth for your family? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a story of hope against all odds. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next incredible true-to-life story. Thank you for listening.